The film begins in 2003 with Jack, a 22-year-old American who was undergoing military training. After the events of 9/11, he became determined to serve his country, dreaming of making a difference and contributing something meaningful during his military service. Before Jack's departure, his family and friends held a farewell party for him, as they were all saddened by the fact that it was the last night they would spend with him before he left for his service in Iraq. His father spoke to him, expressing that he would be worried about him during his service and would miss him a lot. Jack also spoke with his girlfriend, promising her that he would return to her after his service. The next day, Jack and his team traveled to the Abu Ghraib detention center in Iraq, where they would spend their service. The captain spoke to them, informing them that the prison held the most dangerous terrorists in the world, and that they would constantly be subjected to bombings and gunfire. He emphasized that any attempt by insurgents to storm the prison would be considered an act of war, and they needed to be strong and ready to defend the facility and themselves. One of the soldiers spoke to Jack and his team, informing them that there was no electricity at the site, so they had to preserve the manual equipment they had. When they arrived at the location where they would be staying, they discovered it was in terrible condition, with bloodstains on the floor. A soldier told them that this place had been a prison for over 4,000 detainees who were subjected to the worst forms of torture. Jack wrote a mark on the wall, indicating that this was their first day of service. Later, the captain spoke to the new soldiers and welcomed them, warning them about the mines scattered everywhere on the road. He also informed them of a shortage of soldiers handling the detainees, and that a group of volunteers would soon arrive to assist. One of the soldiers mentioned to his colleagues that each soldier had to deal with hundreds of detainees, and that they were working in one of the most dangerous places. He assured them that they would get used to the situation over time. At night, the soldiers struggled to sleep due to the insects and the terrible weather. Suddenly, the prison alarm went off and bombings were heard. The soldiers rushed to their posts in a state of panic, and one soldier was seriously injured. His comrades tried to help him and treat his wound, while Jack stood there shocked and terrified by what was happening. Everyone was deeply saddened when their comrade died in front of their eyes, unable to save him. The days in service were tough for the soldiers, but they slowly began to adapt to the place and the daily routine. They had no phones or internet, and they couldn't communicate with their families or friends. They spent their breaks either training, working out, or eating meals. They tried to break the monotony by watching scorpions fight each other or by following the fights among the detainees. One day, the captain spoke to Jack and asked him to volunteer for the military police. When the captain asked Jack about his age, Jack replied that he was 22 years old. The captain told him that the service at the site would be difficult and that he would face many challenges, but Jack was ready and excited to take on the mission. The next day, Jack went to the wing where the detainees were held and met Sergeant Tanner, who spoke to him and explained the system in place and how to deal with the detainees. He told Jack that the detainees were humiliated and insulted, and they weren't allowed to speak to each other or the soldiers. Tanner showed him one of the cells, where a detainee was standing on his feet all day, unable to move. If he did, he would be electrocuted by wires connected to the cell. Jack was shocked by the scene, as it was the first time he had witnessed something like that. But Tanner told him he would get used to it over time, explaining that the detainees were criminals planting bombs that killed many people worldwide. Therefore, Jack shouldn't sympathize with them. He emphasized that Jack should be strong and strict with the detainees, maintaining security and order, and that if any detainee disobeyed orders, they should be punished and tortured. Tanner also explained that they used harsh punishment methods, such as sleep deprivation and chaining detainees to prevent them from sitting down. He told Jack that the soldiers referred to the detainees by nicknames because they couldn't remember their real names. He also added that there should be 2 guards for each cell, but due to the shortage of soldiers, Jack had to be aggressive and show no weakness in front of the detainees. At night, Jack spoke to his colleagues and told them he had volunteered to work in the detainees' wing, expressing concern that he hadn't yet trained for the system there. The next day, a new group of detainees arrived, shackled in chains with their faces covered in black cloth to prevent them from seeing or hearing anything. Jack removed the cloth from their faces and was shocked by how they were being treated. When he approached one of them, he was attacked by the detainee, leading Tanner to punish the detainee. The detainee then shouted, "Allahu Akbar," and the rest of the detainees followed with the same chant. Jack and Tanner tried to stop them and prevent them from speaking, but they noticed one detainee who remained silent. They nicknamed him the Silent Man. After that, Tanner began torturing the rest of the detainees in brutal ways to humiliate and control them. As time passed, Jack started getting used to the place and tried to deal with the detainees according to the laws he was expected to enforce. While inspecting the cells, he found one of the detainees unconscious, so he opened the door, took him out of the cell, and gave him first aid. He called for his colleagues to assist him, but Tanner told him that the detainee had already died. However, Jack continued trying to help him until Tanner pushed him away, telling him that the man was a terrorist and didn't deserve help. Later, Jack sat with his comrades, and one of them expressed surprise that Jack had given first aid to a terrorist, warning him that what he did might expose him to disease. Jack endured difficult days during his service, wishing that those days would pass quickly so he could return home to his family and girlfriend. One day, one of the prisoners tried to speak to him, but Jack told him that speaking was not allowed. Nevertheless, the prisoner insisted he had something important to say and revealed that he had seen one of the detainees making something that looked like a weapon. Jack, however, did not believe him, even though the prisoner urged him to trust him. Jack began searching the cell and the detainee that the prisoner had mentioned, but he didn't find anything. As a result, he punished the prisoner for lying and took away his blanket. The prisoner tried to explain to Jack that he wasn't lying and was only trying to help, but Jack still didn't believe him. The next day, one of the detainees mocked Jack, while another continued calling him and asked for tissues. When Jack approached to give him the tissues, the detainee attempted to stab him with a sharp object. Jack managed to react quickly and narrowly escaped. Jack started to feel frustrated as several months had passed without him being able to contact his family. One day he spoke with the prisoner who had warned him about the fellow detainee and asked him how long he had been in Iraq. The prisoner replied that he had been there for a year and asked Jack how he had learned English. The prisoner explained that he had studied at a university in London. Jack then asked the prisoner why he was talking to him, and the prisoner answered that he saw Jack as different from the other soldiers, noticing his humanity when he tried to save the old man who died. Jack got to know the prisoner, who told him his name was Gazi, and they began to develop a friendship despite their differences. One day, Jack asked Gazi if he had children, and Gazi replied that he had a son and a daughter, and that he thought of them every day, hoping to return and live with them. Jack asked Gazi why he had been arrested, and Gazi explained that he had been in the city during the attack and was arrested despite being an engineer with a degree from the Islamic University. Gazi then asked Jack why he was there, and Jack replied that he had a good life but wanted to do something different and make an impact, which is why he joined the military. Jack showed Gazi a picture of his girlfriend and told him that he planned to propose to her when he returned home. Gazi promised that he would celebrate their wedding and bring him a chocolate cake when he got out of the detention center. At that moment, two soldiers rushed in and ordered Jack to stay away from Gazi because talking to the detainees was forbidden. They searched Gazi's cell, chained him up, and took him away for interrogation. The next day, the captain gathered the soldiers in the meeting room and informed them that their service period had been extended by another year. The soldiers were deeply disheartened as they had been close to returning home, but now they would spend more time in service. Jack began to feel despair as the days dragged on and each day seemed the same as the last. The soldiers grew increasingly tense and frustrated, with some even suffering mental breakdowns. One day, Jack was in the bathroom when the place was bombed and he sustained minor injuries. His comrades tried to help him and check on him, but he quickly recovered. Jack went to visit Gazi and found him exhausted and suffering from the severe cold. He tried to speak with him and asked about what had happened during the interrogation, but Gazi was unable to respond. Jack left him food in his cell and left. Jack had become so accustomed to the place that he no longer felt fear or was affected by the sounds of the bombings. The days continued with the same routine, with Gazi being taken out of his cell from time to time for further interrogation. Over time, Jack spoke with the guards and asked to accompany them to the interrogations because he was afraid for Gazi and felt sympathy for him. The guard asked him if he had spoken to Gazi or learned anything from him. Jack admitted that he had talked to him and knew him well, insisting that Gazi was just an ordinary person and hadn't done anything wrong. However, the guard told him to follow orders and not talk to the detainees, warning him that if he revealed their conversations, he would face trouble. Afterward, Jack participated in a training fight between the soldiers. He had to face a strong soldier, and everyone was cheering for the fight between them. Jack tried to overpower the other soldier, but the latter was stronger and landed several heavy blows, knocking Jack down. Despite his comrades' encouragement for him to continue, Jack couldn't win the fight. The next day, the soldiers brought Gazi back to his cell after the interrogation, chaining him to prevent him from even sitting down, adding to his suffering. Jack felt deep sadness over what was happening to Gazi and asked him if there was anything he could do to help, but Gazi replied in despair that there was nothing anyone could do. Gazi was in pain from the humiliation and suffering he endured, sinking further into hopelessness. Later, the captain spoke to Jack and told him he wouldn't be able to take any leave due to the shortage of guards and that they needed his help during this critical period. One day, Jack saw Gazi trying to commit suicide. He quickly opened the door and saved him at the last minute, as Gazi had tried to end his life because of the unbearable injustice he faced. Jack felt powerless and heartbroken that he couldn't help him. On another occasion, Jack heard a strange sound. When he went to investigate, he found one of his fellow soldiers holding a weapon, trying to commit suicide due to the stress and harsh conditions. Jack tried to open the door to help him, but couldn't, watching as the soldier broke down, screamed, and then shot himself in the foot. The next day, the soldiers returned Gazi to his cell again, chaining him and covering his face with a black cloth. His health had deteriorated significantly due to the torture he endured, and he cried from the overwhelming despair. When Jack saw his condition, he sympathized with him and spoke with the guards, telling them that they were treating an innocent man terribly. However, the guard argued with Jack, revealing that Gazi had confessed to killing 18 people with a bomb he planted in a restaurant. Jack was shocked by what he heard and confronted Gazi, asking him if what the guard said was true. Jack begged him to tell him that the guard was lying, but Gazi admitted the truth, explaining that he had done it in defense of his homeland. He told Jack that it was hard for him to understand because Jack had never experienced his country being occupied. Gazi assured him that if Jack were in his position, he would have done the same, if not more. Jack was deeply affected and shattered by the revelation, as he had believed that Gazi was an innocent man. After this incident, Jack changed drastically. He began treating the detainees harshly, torturing them and depriving them of sleep or rest. He considered them all terrorists and mocked them, declaring that they were criminals who deserved nothing but torture and poor treatment. Jack transformed into a cruel and aggressive person. When a new soldier arrived at the detention center, Jack started teaching him everything Tanner had taught him before. He instructed the new soldier on how to be aggressive and harsh with the detainees. When Jack saw Gazi sleeping, he dragged him out of his cell and tortured him mercilessly. At night, Jack would gather with his comrades as usual, talking about their lives and expressing their longing to return to their homes and families. Jack missed his girlfriend, who had told him she would wait for him until his service ended. He wished for the days to pass quickly so he could return to his normal life. Jack spent the remaining days of his service with his comrades, trying to endure until their service was over. When the time for their return finally came, they prepared to leave. Before departing the detention center, Jack saw Gazi and gave him one last glance without saying a word. He then bid farewell to his comrades, who were excited and happy to return to their normal lives. Jack returned to his country, overjoyed to reunite with his family and girlfriend. However, his family noticed that he had changed. He had become more silent and spoke less. His father talked to him, asking if he had killed anyone or treated someone badly during his service. Jack replied that he hadn't. One day, Jack went shopping with his girlfriend, and when he saw a chocolate cake at the store, he remembered Gazi and the days he spent at the detention center. Later, Jack watched the news on TV, which was showing images from Abu Ghraib prison, revealing American soldiers torturing detainees in brutal ways. Among the images, Jack saw himself torturing Gazi. At that moment, Jack realized he would face legal consequences along with all the soldiers involved in those crimes. When his girlfriend saw the images, she couldn't believe that Jack had done such things and had turned into such a violent person. Jack was overwhelmed with regret for what he had done and realized that he had lost his humanity after becoming cruel and merciless.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.